All right. It is a glorious, sunshiny Saturday morning. And I can't think of any way I would rather be spending this time than to get to have this talk with Lindsay Musser Pacheco, who, gosh, it was how many weeks ago was I with you on a weekend, wee hours of the morning?
Yeah,
It
it was
wasn't that
like,
long ago.
yeah, just a little bit more than a month.
A little bit of a month ago. So you see a baby tucked in. This is so cool because this is one of the first times we're going to have a birth story, a fresh birth story. I think the last person I spoke to, her baby was 4 years old already. So we have a very fresh
Wow.
birth story, which I think is awesome because you're really still in this infant newborn phase, and so it's super generous of you to be willing to share your story about birth with people who I think will be encouraged and pick up a little bit of information and insight. So, thanks so much for giving us this time this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just, I mean, you can start wherever you'd like. I kind of like the timeline of knowing some of the things that you were thinking during pregnancy and some of the ways that you were maybe preparing and how that led up to birth. But tell us a story about how this beautiful creature who you're wearing right now came into the world.
Seem to be awesome. Well, thank you. I'm honored to tell this, and the stories that you had me read really helped me. So I'm very honored to be able to be someone who shares their story, and hopefully mine can help somebody else. Um, so I'm 38, and I would say most of my friends had their babies like got married and had their babies earlier than me. So I like to tell people that all my friends are on their third kid.
Hmm.
So in some ways, I should have been I feel like I should have known a lot about birth, but I wasn't at my friends' births. And I wasn't like, because I didn't have a kid at that time, I wasn't really paying a ton of attention to like all the little things that were happening. So I did actually feel kind of unprepared um, as like started this journey. Um, Israel, my husband, and I got married in 2016, which at the telling of the story is 5 years ago. And we decided that we wanted to wait for, have 4 or 5 years to ourselves. We did talk about like where that would put me age wise. And I think the first thing I want to say in my story is that there's so much talk around about how like after 35, your fertility just like plummets off a cliff and your eggs are getting all dusty. Like people would literally say things to me when I was not even dating anybody. Like I hadn't
Yeah.
even found a serious person to date, and people would be like, "Don't you want to have kids soon? Like your eggs are rotting inside you."
Gosh,
And so not only did that
people
make
say
me
horrible
want to punch
things.
people, yeah, like people feel like they can say whatever. So not only did that make me want to throw people out windows, but also I started looking into that a little bit. Um, and my gut feeling was like, screw everyone else and their timelines. This is the journey that I'm on. I did actually say to one person, I was like, what exactly do you want me to do? Just get knocked up like now? And that kind of put somebody in their place.
Yeah.
But that was kind of my first exposure to like everybody has so much opinions on this and they want to tell you, and they think that their perspective on it is like fact and true. And my gut feeling plus the experience, I was looking around, and then a lot of my friends had their kids young, but also more and more of my friends were like finishing grad school first. And I just, in like this day and age, people wait longer because they have more things they need to do before they feel, or a lot of people have more things they need to do before they feel like steady and like put together enough to bring a kid into the picture, which was my situation. I had a certain point I wanted to get my career and my finances to. I just wasn't one of those people that was like, yeah, just throw a baby in the mix and like it'll be good. And I know that's some people's way, and I actually really admire that, but that wasn't me. I
Right.
needed to feel a little bit more prepared. So we wanted 4 or 5 years, just where it was just the two of us, before we started trying to get pregnant. And that's what we stuck to. And I did read around a little bit about that. And one thing I found that was helpful was that all this talk about like 35 and 40 being these like magical milestones where like you can't have a healthy pregnancy after them. Um, it seems from what I found that most of those stories and ideas are based on like one study that was done super long ago. And the fact is that like really there's been a lot of health advances. And anyway, so if you're hearing this and age is a thing for you, here I am, an almost 40 mama, and take that, everybody else who says
Yeah. Yeah.
that. So I was 37 when we started to get pregnant. And as most people watching this will know, like 2020 was the year of the coronavirus pandemic. So you probably can tell from the beginning of what I said earlier that I'm kind of a planner, or in some ways, and I like to be on big events. So we thought about when we wanted to get pregnant and when I wanted to give birth. And my idea was, man, it would be really nice to give birth in the spring, because then I won't be 9 months pregnant when it's super hot. Or I won't be like stuck inside the house with a new baby when it's freezing. We live in Philadelphia and winters are not fun. So I thought it'd be cool to like see if we could time it so that it was giving birth in the spring. I wasn't super attached to that, but I was like, oh, it'd be nice. And another thing that we factored into the whole thing was health insurance. So I'm self-employed. And my husband is a good bit younger than me, and he was like growing his career. And so my health insurance is nothing. I mean, I was paying for some for myself when I was single, but it was like ridiculous, super high deductible. My health plan was don't get sick ever.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what I did. And then my husband, once he got his job, had access to, he teaches at an Ivy League university, and he had access to, like, he could choose a really good, more expensive health plan, or one that was more like what I had as a self-employed person, higher deductible, and it's more responsibility on yourself. But then the university would put money into an HSA and kind of like save money for you, or help you save money. So for the first couple years of our marriage, we chose that. We decided we're not going to be trying to have kids. So let's do this, like this insurance. And then that's my point, is that we timed it, right? We were like, okay, now we're in June or July, he's allowed to like switch over to the new plan. Now we have like the prenatal care and all that stuff, and a decent healthcare plan. Like now we'll start to get pregnant. So it seems like we got pregnant pretty much right away. So I found out in August, and across, the rules about when you're supposed to tell people and how long you're supposed to wait and everything crossed my mind. And I was like, well, here we go. Now we're going to find out if this geriatric pregnancy can be. And we told my parents first, and that was fun. We actually took them on like a little vacation out into the woods, and told my parents with a scavenger hunt, where at the end they found the little announcement. And that was a cool thing to do for my parents. And then just waited. And I was still working from home, self-employed, feeling like there was a lot of responsibility. Like I work a lot of hours. It's me running my business, and that's pretty much it. I have some people that I hire that work virtually, but the buck stops with me. So I work a lot. And I found myself not having much time to research things. I thought I was going to like work out a lot, and I really didn't have that time. And so I can't remember when it was that I called you, but it was kind of late-ish in the pregnancy that I was like, hey, I think I want a doula. And a couple of my friends had used a doula. I can't remember actually what like really influenced that decision, but I think the biggest thing was I felt like the idea of having a coach and someone to like be with me during this would be really great, because we were in the middle of the pandemic. Nobody was around. Like there was a lot of isolating factors in this. And so having somebody kind of in my corner, somebody to tell me what was going on just seemed cool. Previously, everything that I had thought about birth was very like Western medical centered. I had heard about doulas and midwives and what they did, and I'd heard about people having home births, and I knew a couple people that had home births. And I use the phrase crunchy granola with like all the love, like, because there's a lot of me that is like that too. But I was like, yeah, I don't, like I think you would go to a hospital and you would take whatever drugs they're going to offer you.
Mhm.
And like, why is everybody so excited about these alternative ways? So the first thing that Elizabeth did with me was invite me to go to one of her classes. And there was a couple other girls on the Zoom. It was nice. Everybody's nice. We had a lot of fun. It was very low key. But she immediately pointed us to some resources that started to really get me thinking. And one of the things she pointed us to was what I'm doing now, the birth story. She was like,
Mhm.
hey, there's a lot of messages. I'm saying she, like I'm not talking to you.
Yeah.
Forgot you're on the interview.
Talking to everyone else, right, yeah. Yeah, and so the Positively Pregnant class was the one that you're
Yeah,
talking
that's what
about,
it was
right?
called. And that opened my eyes to the fact what you said there was like, hey, there's a lot of negative messaging. When you say you're pregnant, everybody likes to go, oh man, and then come out with some terrible story about someone they know that had a difficult birth, or they
Mhm.
start talking about how you're never going to get sleep. And that immediately connected with me because I was like, oh yeah. I just figured that was what people do. Like, you know how people complain about the weather? Like everyone
Mhm.
likes negative stories are what people like do small talk about. But they got me thinking right away, yeah, how does that affect me and what I'm expecting here? And when I examined my own thoughts, it was totally true. Like I've always been like, oh man, I want to have kids, but man, birth is gonna suck. And the thing I was most afraid of was tearing. Like to
Mhm.
me, that just sounded awful. Like in any other situation that like your flesh would be torn, that'd be like a torture situation.
Yeah.
Um, and so I always figured it was like something that I would have to go through, but that it would be like really, really bad. And so she was the first person who made me think like, hey, could we look at this differently? And I am really into the way your mindset can change things, like being somebody that runs a business, that comes up a lot in my life. The way you look at things and the way you approach things can really affect your experience and your results. So I was open to that. And then when I started reading, I had to like make time in my schedule to read these stories, like really carved out. I think it was like a early Saturday morning or something. And I was like, I'm doing this no matter what the other distractions are. I'm reading this. I went through all these stories on the website, and so many people gave details about what their birth was like, and they had pretty easy births. And I was like, hmm. And I had always heard and thought about the fact that like, women all over the world have been doing this for centuries. Like, why do we act now like it's like every birth is a medical emergency?
Mhm.
um that had crossed my mind before, but then hearing all these good stories, it did exactly what you said it would do. It would just kind of push me to have a different idea of how my birth could go.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it all really started, because I'm open to that kind of thing. I was like, well, how far can we take this? If I mentally imagine myself just like effortlessly popping this baby out, how good of an experience could this be? Um, you mentioned a midwife, a really famous midwife during that, but I don't, how do you say her name? Is it
Ina
Ina?
May.
It is
Mhm.
Ina.
Ina May
Okay.
Gaskin. Mhm.
And randomly we were walking around, we live in West Philly, and there's always a lot of times on Saturdays there's a guy that sells a ton of books on the sidewalk, like a ton, like has all these, and it's used books and there's a lot of cool stuff. And so we walked by there one Saturday not too long after your class, and what do I see but two Ina May? There was a breastfeeding and a birth book,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh, we got to get these. And it was funny, they were more expensive than all the other books that he had there. I don't know why he marked them up, but I was like, it was like a pink text
'Cause
or
it's
something.
West Philly.
Yeah. I was
West
like,
Philly
this,
loves crunchy birth.
yeah. I was like, these are probably in high demand. I could see this. So we bought them anyway, and I started reading them at night before we go to bed. I would just tear through those birth stories, and I mean, she's real crunchy granola. She has like a farm where everybody goes, and in the beginning there
Mhm.
wasn't any running water and stuff. And but I loved it. I was like, this is awesome. This girl is bad. Like she's
Yeah.
awesome. And all these women just like went through and did the birth naturally and kind of like how they wanted to, and there's very little interventions. And something that almost all of them talked about that made it really vivid for me was like the position that they were in when they birthed. So she was like, different people were like, oh, I was bouncing up and down this ball, and then I sat in the birthing chair, and then I was like hanging, holding onto these ropes and like squatting, and people described going through like a bunch of different positions, and that'll come up in my story later. Like that just made it very vivid for me.
Mhm.
And then I had another conversation with you, and you talked about because I think I might have asked you about the epidural, or it came up, and you were like, well, you know, the obvious pros are eliminating or lessening a lot of the pain, and then here's the cons. And you talked about not being able to like walk around and change positions because your legs are not usable at that point.
Yeah.
And that clicked with me right away. And you also talked about the monitor, which Ina May was talking about in her books too. Like in the hospital, for whatever reason, they're like, oh, the baby has to be monitored like every single second. And when you have a home birth or you work with midwives, they just like check in, everything's good. Okay, go back to what you're doing, check in, monitor the baby. And again, that would like restricted your movement if you have to be on the monitor. So I did not know that. But I had read again as I was doing all this reading, like, hey, why do we always have women labor on their backs? That's the most inefficient and uncomfortable way to labor. So that this was the big thing that pushed me towards like looking at birth differently, the positioning. For whatever reason, I was like, yeah, I do not want to be told that I can't move around. And physicality was a big deal for me. I was an athlete growing up, a gymnast and two sports in high school and college. And I like the idea of your body can do all this cool stuff. And I didn't want to restrict my body, especially if it wasn't for good reasons.
Yeah.
So that was a big factor for me. Kind of wanted to dig in more to what you taught and see what else you could teach me that I didn't know about. And so actual birth, so about 7.5, 8 months in, the doctor started telling me that baby's name is Adiel, and they were saying that he was smaller than he should be. And my first thoughts were like, I'm a small person. I'm 5'1", like 125 pounds. Like my husband's not a huge guy. Like,
Mhm.
okay, it's probably just a small baby. What's the big deal? But they said that that could be a symptom that he's not getting nutrients across the placenta, um, called IUGR, I guess.
Mhm.
So then they wanted to induce him early. And that was backwards to my intuition. I was like, wait, if he's too small, shouldn't you leave him in there to cook a little longer?
Right.
But it was then when they explained it again, I was like, oh, okay, if he's not getting enough nutrients, then leaving him in there would be bad. Got it. He's big enough to come out. Okay, I guess we're doing this faster, earlier than I thought. And having been the planner, that did throw me for a loop. Like my heart hit the bottom of my stomach for a minute. The doctor was literally staring at me saying, so we'll have you come in for a couple of these tests, and we're going to measure like his heartbeat and the blood flow and stuff like that. And just be prepared that at any one of those points, we could just say, okay, go upstairs and have the baby now. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
That's how this works. And so I had about a month left, but because I'd been so busy working from home, trying to get through all this Corona stuff and keep my business running at the same time, there were so many things we didn't have done. So like, I don't think I set up a baby registry until like at all, until just a little bit before that. And a couple of girls that I'm in a group with and we meet every week, they were like, what? You don't have a baby registry yet? Like, so I had this feeling of like, yeah, okay, I'm a little behind. I'm doing things a little last minute, but I have 30 days. I can get all these things done. We can get we had almost nothing for the nursery. I need to read a lot more. I need to make it. I have no kind of like birth plan other than I'm kind of interested in maybe not doing the epidural, and I want to move around, and that's about it. So I was like, yeah, but I have 30 days to get my ish together, you know? And then they're like, no, you should probably have this baby now. I was like, what? So I went home and told my husband that, and it was like, oh, yeah, same conversation, like, wait, he's little, so you're going to have him early. So then I started going to the doctor 2 times a week, and they would do the tests. And after every test, they'd be like, and I could tell they wanted to be encouraging and keep me from worrying. After every test, they'd be like, he's doing great. He like scored a 10 out of 10. The blood flow is through your umbilical cord is fine. He's kicking and moving around great. And I was like, cool. Are you going to measure him and see if he's bigger? And they're like, no. And I did learn later that like fetal measurement is kind of an estimate anyway. So
Yeah.
anyway, but it did for a little while. It was weird. I was like, why are we measuring if the idea is that he isn't big enough, like to the point where you're going to induce me to have him early? And he's scoring a 10 out of 10. Like I said, do we have to induce? Really? They really kind of kept pushing that was the better idea. So I decided, well, you're the doctors. I'm gonna listen to you. And I called Elizabeth at some point and was like, and told her what was going on. And you were like, I don't know, maybe you can share this now, but were you concerned? It seemed a little bit like you were like, maybe we don't have to induce, or did you think it was fine?
It's a pretty, like you said, it's counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those pretty like clear cut things. The trajectory of growth is what they're looking at. So like we know littler people might have genetically littler babies, but we expect those babies to have a trajectory of growth. And so when we're like, we see that growth not happening on the healthy trajectory, like we want them then. And so I did really feel, but I think we talked about this won't be new news to you. The other thing that was going on was that he did not want to be head down. Right. So
Oh
we had
yeah.
a lot of back and forth of like, is this baby going to get head down? If he's not going to get head down, they can do this external version where they try to move him. But I think because I cared for you guys both so much personally. That's the other aspect is I've known you since before you met your husband and shared the joy with you when you met him. And it's so cool to see like you as a family of three now. But I think I was reserving my hope a little bit to where I hoped that you could feel okay and well taken care of in the case that this baby doesn't turn and he does need to get out early. And that means planning for a cesarean birth.
Yeah.
And I really felt, I think the behind the scenes was that I probably told my husband, I really think Lindsay might need to have a cesarean in order to have a safe circumstance. So I wasn't doubtful about the what your doctors were looking at with his measurement. I was just a little disappointed on your behalf, thinking, knowing that movement and having this positive birth story, and you're so beautifully flexible to like, whatever we need to do, we need to do. But I mean, as you continue and tell how things actually unfolded, I stand in awe and in just gratitude for how things unfolded for you, and
Yeah.
how your birth story unfolded because you didn't need a cesarean.
No, it was
He
awesome.
he just got
So
himself in the right position
you're right. I
at the
forgot
right
about
time.
that. And that really happened almost immediately. So like, and then you're right. Then he started flipping around again, but it was like a Friday when they told me he's too small and he's not turned right. And then I came back in on Monday and we did all the tests and they're like, oh, okay, 10, 10, 10, and he turned. And I was like, okay. But then they still wanted me to keep coming back. So I did, kept coming 2 days a week, 2 appointments a week. And then he did, yeah, as we got closer to the time that they were going to do, he did flip again. And then I was like, oh no. And we looked at Spinning Baby's website and some other stuff. And I did a few things, but I guess I did always through the whole pregnancy always have this, and maybe again it goes back to just like defying the people that told me I was too old to do this. There was this gut feeling of like, I'm gonna freaking do this and everything's gonna be perfect.
And you did, and it was.
Yeah, and the whole time I took that with a grain of salt. Like I was like, I don't know that, but I did kind of know it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, he flipped. They scheduled the thing where they were going to
The
move him.
version. Mhm.
Yeah. And we ended up not needing that. So then it was like Friday, April 2nd, where they told me to, come on, let's do this. And I was like, all right, and called you. And we did have, I did have myself enough together to have like a hospital bag packed.
Mhm.
And oh, the other thing that was factoring into making this a little bit crazy was I mentioned my husband's a teacher. So like if we had the baby on the due date, the 20th, he would have only had 1 week of teaching classes left. And he's teaching and getting his PhD. So he's pretty busy too. And bumping this all up a month earlier meant like he was in the middle of his last month of wrapping things up for his classes and for him. And it was like there was a lot going on. We had expected to be able to have 30 more days before we had to switch to like focus on baby mode. So he was like, okay, I've got to cut everything off and come to the hospital. All right. So there was a little bit of added stress there. And then we got there. Oh, you came over a little bit before that though and taught us massage techniques.
Mhm.
And that was awesome. Like they made such a difference. I could feel my body relaxing right away. And it was really cool. Like Israel is a very supportive partner. And it was really cool to give him something specific to do
Mhm.
because no matter how supportive your partner is, I think it can be kind of like the baby's in your body. What do I do?
Yeah.
And so specific ways that he could touch me that were like immediate pain relief, that was a big deal. And through reading those books, I had said, hey, this Ina May lady has people like kiss each other and stuff. Are you down for that? And he was like, sure. So,
I guess I can kiss you.
yeah, like as you're contracting. So he was ready for anything, but that was really cool and it was very effective. And that gave me a lot of confidence, like, oh, there's stuff we can do to handle the pain. Whereas up until then, even with all the stuff you taught me, the question in my mind was still like, tough it out through this like super intense, worse pain, or take the drugs that also make you do some stuff that you don't really want to do. Um, as soon as we taught those others, I was like, oh, there's like ways to manage this pain. Cool. So then we went to the hospital. They put the pill in that makes you start. Oh, and they also checked my cervix the day before that we were going to have the inversion thing. And the doctor was like, okay, hang on, this is going to hurt. And then she put her fingers in and checked, and she went out, and I was like, are you done? And she was like, yeah, that didn't hurt. And I was like, no. And she said that my cervix was dilating and doing what it's supposed to do.
Mhm.
So that was also like a big blessing that apparently a lot of the cervix checks are supposed to be super painful, or they are for a lot of people. And mine just did what it was supposed to do and it really didn't hurt. Um, and that gave me more confidence. So they do the induction, we're at the hospital, kind of looking around and like, okay, what's next? And we were able to do most of the stuff that between the books and talking to you, like eating, I was like, yeah, I want to eat when I want to eat. I'm not sucking on ice cubes. Um, and so they let us like order in, and I felt like, all right, I have, calories and like strength to get through something like this. And they brought a birthing ball in, so we were allowed to bounce up and down. We talked about how long we were going to leave them on the cord before we clamped it, and they were pretty cool with that. And I knew that you were coming.
Mhm.
So the contractions started, and they also weren't like all that bad. It was like period cramps, um, which I've never had terrible, terrible period cramps. And so then just kind of fast forward to, they started to become intense enough that we called you and said, I think this is happening now.
Mhm.
You came in, and when you showed up, I was like, yeah. I just felt so taken care of, and you were so ready, and you're such a calming presence. Um, and we had a good experience with nurses and everything up to that point so far. But when you came in, I was just like, yeah, the expert is here. Like,
Mhm.
I felt so taken care of. Um, and then the biggest thing was just like how to handle, you started teaching me more pain management stuff. So you put combs in my hand to hold on
Mhm.
to, and that was cool. And we talked about what position I wanted to be in. You brought lavender in, which I was surprised at how that affected me too.
Mhm.
Like that was definitely one thing that you mentioned that I was like, ah, whatever, I don't care how it smells. But I
But
did.
then it's like takes you to another place.
Yeah, it
Brings
like
some
flipped a
peace.
switch, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh, this is, I can't even describe really how that affected me, but that was effective. Um, and we started talking about the different positions. And so in the end, well, first I'll say, the most effective pain management thing that you taught me was the breathing, and you being there to tell me when I was not relaxed. So I guess what I would say about the contractions is, um, I don't know if this is everybody's response, but my response to pain was to tense up, right? And tense up and tough it out until that contraction passed. And you were right there to tell me, put your shoulders down, relax your face. Any noises that you make need to be low.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, that took it from like 10 to 3
Yeah.
in terms of what I was feeling. Like, and you need somebody else there to tell you, like, I'm not conscious enough. I can't observe myself quite enough, quite self-aware enough to be like, oh, my face is not relaxed.
Yeah.
Once you taught me that, then I was like, oh, okay, yeah, now I can feel it. But man, those like 3 or 4 things, low noises, not high ones, low shoulder, relax your face, it made everything bearable. And one phrase that I used that was super powerful, I got from the Ina May books. There was one girl in there, that one lady that she said talked she thought of the pain as like waves on the ocean,
Mhm.
and like just let the wave go over you. And that was
Mhm.
super effective for me because I love the ocean. I'm like, I like surf a little bit, and I love, if I go to the beach, I'm in the waves all the time, and that's very familiar to me, that idea of like the wave will pass. And that was the worst thing about pain too, is like thinking, how long is this gonna last? And knowing that it was just gonna be like 45 seconds long, and that it was gonna pass like a wave in the ocean, that made it so manageable to me. So I just kept thinking, like, imagining that, oh, they said imagine that it's a wave pushing you that much closer
Mm.
to the moment when you can see your child. That was cool. And the other thing they said in that book was, one lady was like imagining herself opening up like a flower.
Mhm.
And I also liked that technique because, again, that was like what I was the most scared of. This little hole is going to open up really big and I'm going to rip things.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm opening like a flower, I'm opening like a flower, the wave thing. And in the end, all those contractions, like nothing was as bad as what I imagined. It was for sure uncomfortable, and it was for sure like pain, I guess, but it was not this unbearable thing that I imagined. And having all those different like activities to do and things to do to control, and knowing that it was only gonna be, it's a couple seconds, and then I get a break, and then a couple, I was like, I can do this.
Yeah.
So in the end, I did a lot on the ball, a lot of the bouncing up and down, which incidentally he really likes now that he's out.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and then when I finally did get on the bed, I don't know what made me certain about this, because I didn't have like this written out in a birth plan or anything, but I was like, I want to be on my hands and knees. And the nurse was like, cool, you can hang on the back we can like flip the back of the bed up, and if you want your hands to be higher, you can do that. And I was like, yeah. And as soon as I got into that position, that felt like, yep, this is how it's gonna work. Um, that had also come a little bit from Ina May's book. She showed a whole lot of like drawings and pictures from all over the world, and people that went to study in really remote places, and how do women give birth when they're not influenced by a bunch of Western stuff. And there was a lot of like squatting and being on all fours, and it made
Mhm.
sense to me. So there I am hanging like off the side of the bed. And then you said there's going to be a point where you can't really like hold back anymore, and that's when the baby's coming. And oh yeah, and they kept checking in with me and saying, would you like the epidural, would you like the epidural? it was like when you're at a party and they keep coming up to you and offering the appetizers.
Mhm.
Like, so nobody was pushing me to get it, but
Right.
they asked me at the beginning, like, do you want it? And I said, I'm not opposed to having it. Like, I'm not one of those people that's like, if I have this, I'm a failure. But
Right.
I did, but I was like, but I do kind of want to see how far I can get without it. And they asked me that and I answered that way like 3 different times. So they said, okay, cool. We will just keep coming up to you and offering it to you. And just keep in mind that it won't necessarily be immediately available.
Mhm.
Like, there's other people giving birth right now. It might be a half an hour before we can get the guy over here. And then it takes 15 minutes to put it in. And so, like, are you cool with that? And I was like, I got it. I still want to wait as long as possible. And then I understand that there's a waiting period after I say yes. So the contractions are getting more and more. And they had asked me and I had turned it down like a couple times. And then I got like a super strong contraction. And they said that several people told me like, oh, it's going to feel like you have to poop. And I think you even said that too. This is where I got really scared. And I'll just be very blunt. I was like, yo, like, what if I tear my butthole? Because that was where I was feeling the most.
Yeah.
It was almost like that was like being made to open more than my vagina. And I was like, but I don't have to poop. Like, ah. So, and I didn't know how. I was like, what do I do about that? It's just like the whole thing gonna tear. So, um, so there was one when it started to get that strong. I said, okay, I want the epidural. And then your kind, calm voice came from the side and behind me, and you were like, okay, I think this baby is going to be here before they can get the epidural here.
Yeah.
And you were just so matter of fact and so calm. And I was like, all right, nothing I can do about that then. Like, I guess that decision's made for me. So now we're going to do the pain management thing. And so that actually made it pretty easy that the baby was coming fast. I didn't have to agonize over that decision. And then I had another really hard contraction and I was like, I think he's coming. And you were like, okay. And at this point, this is at least my memory of it. You were saying like, but the doctors and nurses weren't ready yet because they thought because they induced me that it was going to like take a really, really long drawn out time, but I was progressing faster than they thought I would. So when I said like, I'm ready, you were like, hang on. We need these people to like get in position behind you. And you told me, I will never forget this. You told me, have you ever been in a crowded room and you have to fart? So you hold it in. I was like, yeah, everybody has. She's like, I need you to do that. Hold it in until you get a contraction that your body like demands that you push. Everything else I want you to hold in. And I was like, okay, which again put the pain like completely in my control. They were starting to get scary and I was starting to get like, what happens next? Does everything just explode and rip in two? Like that's what this feels like is going to happen. You told me I could hold it back.
Mhm.
So I was like,
I think probably what I was just like you need to just like sneak the fart out really quiet. That's the
yeah,
technique. You don't
yeah.
have to hold it in, but like don't rip roar, let it out. You just like sneak a little bit out and relieve that little bit of pressure, but don't push with all your might because we need the nurse and the doctor and the everything. Because
And
I
that
don't
was
catch babies.
perfect.
I don't
You don't
catch
catch
babies.
babies.
Not my job. It's not my training. I'm not
That
like
was
a
the best advice. And the whole
yeah.
hospital staff was so impressed with you. And I don't know if that in particular was like one of the things, but for me, that was like, that changed everything.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm like controlling it that way, which made a very marked distinction between the ones I could control and the ones I couldn't control. And so one came that I really couldn't control. And I was like, ooh, I felt something move. Can you see him? And the staff goes, yeah, reach your hand back. You'll be able to feel the soft, head. Oh, you want to talk now?
Right there.
So, yeah, that was pretty much it. It was literally like, there was the push where I felt the soft part of the head. And then maybe like two that I controlled. And then the next one, I was like, oh, this is it. And he shot out in one push. I honestly thought he like flew 5 feet towards the next wall.
He was a little guy, because
Very little.
you're asking him to come early so that he could be outside, start breastfeeding, start getting all that nutrition from breastfeeding, which he looks amazing now. But one of the beautiful things I think about your birth story is that he had just made the cutoff. He was, I
37
don't
weeks.
remember what the grams are because they do it in
Oh, wait.
grams and we're so American,
Yeah.
but he was 4 pounds, 10 ounces.
Yeah.
Like just the cutoff that he didn't have to go to the intensive care nursery.
Yeah. Yeah. And that next part was awesome. Like they told me before, as I was on my hands and knees, I heard somebody say, like, is this the position that she's choosing? And you said, yeah. And I thought that was cool that they were like affirming, like they were putting me in charge. And you were like, yeah, this is what she's doing. And then they said, okay, in that case, when the baby comes, and then they told me, we're going to hand him to you, like you stay on your hands and knees, we're going to hand him to you underneath, you take him and then roll over and be on your back and put him on your chest. And I was like, oh, cool. They're like strategizing so that I can do skin to skin, like as quickly as possible. And, I don't know, probably safely as possible. Like, don't try to roll over and sit on him and then, like have him in your arms first. So that was cool. I knew what to expect, and that is how they did it. Oh, and I remember praying during this too. Like, I remember there's one more thing I want to say about like mindset and just, I remember being like, okay, God, I want to do this and I want to pop this baby out in like 15 minutes. And I'm okay if we can't, so you know what I want to do.
Mm.
And that was what I imagined. Like as soon as they started talking to me about the induction and everything, I was like, okay, he's not even 5 pounds. Babies are, people have babies at like 9 and 10. Like that means probably that I could, like, what if I did have one of those really, he's smaller, he's going to be easier, right? What if I did have one of those just like really, really easy births? And that's kind of what happened in the end. Couple pushes, boom, he came right out. And of course I was like, oh, that's it, awesome. And they put him underneath me and you took pictures, which was so cool. I'm so glad I have those. They're awesome. They handed him to me, and then we had skin to skin, and then like after a little while they did have to take him over and weigh him and all that stuff, but they never had to like take him away from me and put him on machines and everything. I'm still getting good at getting out of these wrap things.
Say, if you want me, I can also pause for you to get situated if you would like.
I think I've almost got it. Yeah.
You are like the multitasking mom. That's what
already, right?
That's what I think you were probably good at life before you even had a baby, but definitely a top skill that you need for parenthood.
You say hi to the camera, bud.
Oh my goodness, he looks amazing.
Oh, he's getting so big compared to what he's still tiny, but like.
Oh goodness. He's like, I wasn't ready to wake up and be on camera.
I
know. And also the Zoom background is making him disappear.
I know, he's like
parts of him can disappear. We'll have to, maybe there's a couple of favorite pictures you could send me that when I put this up like on the blog post, okay, people can take in the real like lusciousness of his cheeks and all his adorable parts without.
You said something about a fresh baby and I'm like, yes, so like that baby smell. Like, oh. Here we go. If we put you in front of me, they can see.
Oh, so sweet. Look at you. Oh my goodness. Oh, amazing.
The lady that helped me bring you into the world.
Awesome. I mean, I think when I reflect back on how everything went, I remember leaving with just such a huge sense of gratitude of how things unfolded for you, that even different choices that you had to make along the way about where to give birth, and you entertained the idea of a home birth. And had you done that, that's a plan that would have been subverted by his desire to not grow in the womb, and you would have had a hospital induction even if you'd started with a home birth midwife. And so I see all these times that your intuition and just living out who you were led you to the choices that you made that were just right for you. And not everybody has like a quick birth. Not everyone has a induction that they just start it and then your body takes over. How beautiful yours
Mhm.
did. Um, Not everybody has a supportive place to give birth where they're like, oh, hands and knees, great. Well, we'll just pass them underneath you.
Yeah.
But I feel so grateful. I feel so grateful for you that you expected and then received all these beautiful things for the story of this boy.
Well, thank you for kind of setting it up for me. I wouldn't have known to ask for a lot of those things. I wouldn't have known what I wanted, but as soon as you kind of explained and gave the details, and you never pushed one thing over the other super hard, you just explained and it became clear what I wanted. And then yeah, I was so glad I had you. Both Israel and me were like, yo, imagine that without her. So we were very thankful for you.
Yeah. Well, I feel so honored that I got to be there with you. And I love that now we're sharing this. So a lot of other people, I know there's people that know you that are going to relate, sharing the joy of the story. And I think there's people that don't know you at all and would are just going to be so glad and encouraged and feel hopeful, even if the details of someone else's story are totally different. The spirit of the story, I think, is so encouraging.
Yeah.
So thank
Yeah.
you for your time.
Hey,
So
thank you.
somebody was about to bust in the door.
Perfect
My
timing.
2-year-old saying she's done with me being on Zoom.
Mom, it's over.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we will have this story up to share and yeah, we'll keep it send us some other pictures so people can see
Okay.
this baby for all his cuteness. And thank you so much for sharing
You.
your story.
Thank you.